Today's presentation is about commercial leases, and in particular, our goals. Well, I guess start off and introduce myself. Morgan Allison. I am a former attorney, still licensed to practice law, but I prefer not to. Uh, Now I'm a commercial real estate specialist, and I give strategic advice to owners and investors about commercial real estate. And the objective today is first to help you identify opportunities. Opportunity of a possibility of, hey, maybe there's a commercial angle here. Understand the key differences between the residential and commercial kinds of leases. Mm-hmm. And to make professional referrals. So, when and how to bring me in to the situation so we can all make a lot of money. So that's what I want to say. I want to say is make a lot of money. So the quick why this matters to you, your clients already trust you. So you are the trusted advocate that is in bringing in some professional assistance if necessary. And so what I hope this will do is this will add and strengthen your current relationships by spotting opportunities that other agents would miss, and by having a basic understanding of what the issues are, and you can discuss them with your clients. And to help you be able to speak intelligently about the kinds of issues to help protect your client and enhance your reputation. And hopefully bringing you a new income stream of referrals and make us all a lot of money. So here are the fundamental differences between residential and commercial leases. So in a residential lease, there's usually standardized forms. It's usually like 2 pages or maybe 5 pages sometimes. What's that? Yeah, it's a very short document. It's usually standardized, so it's a template form that they just use all the time. Commercial leases, they're complex contracts. They're usually in the 30 to 40 page range instead of 5 to 10 pages. Residential, high volume transactions. Commercial, everything is negotiable, and I mean everything is negotiable. That's one of the things I love about doing commercial real estate is everything's on the table, and the more creative you are, the more you can solve really interesting problems. In residential leases, you have consumer protection laws. So, I mean, you're familiar with this is also true in the kind of contracts that we use when we do a sale. So on the residential side, you have a boilerplate contract that you have to use, that everybody uses with all the fill in the blank stuff. We don't use any of that on the commercial side. Everything is up for grabs. Everything is up for negotiation. So you have a lot of protections on the residential side. On the commercial side, it's the Wild West. The lease document is king. On residential, you have there's usually not any negotiation. It's kind of a take it or leave it kind of a proposition normally. On the commercial side, like I said, everything is negotiable, and the parties, you have sophisticated parties, so they can come up with some weird stuff. So this is the disclaimer. This presentation is for educational purposes. It is not legal advice. Yes, I am an attorney, but that makes it especially important that I stress this is not legal advice. I am not offering this as legal counsel. You should always advise your clients to consult an attorney. I tell my clients to consult an attorney, even though I am an attorney, because when I'm operating in the real estate world, I'm not operating as an attorney. I'm operating as a real estate agent. So I'm not wearing that hat. They're not paying me for that. So that's the fact that I have that background helps, but I'm not there to provide legal advice, and they should get proper legal advice. So let's talk about the money. In a residential lease, it's usually very straightforward. You have the rent, and the rent is the rent. You pay the rent, and that's what you pay. There's nothing mysterious about it. It's not complicated. If it says $1,000 a month, you pay $1,000 a month. And the commercial side is more complicated. There's the base rent. So whenever the rent is shown, you don't know if that's like everything or not. Just from the number. There's base rent plus additional rent. This is a very big difference. So the base rent is the fixed amount that they pay for the space. Additional rent is their we're going to get into this in a minute, but there's like what we call triple net, or there's various net rents, which just means that these things are not included in the rent. So things like the pro rata share of building operating expenses. So that would be the insurance, the maintenance, common area maintenance, for example, the taxes on the property. These are all things that a commercial client might have to pay in addition to the rent. So it's very important to make sure that your client knows exactly what they're actually going to have to pay. So then you also have what are called escalations. These are often built into contracts where the rent increases over time. So the rent in is a very standard clause in a multi-year commercial lease. So, for example, if you have like a 3-year, 5-year lease, the rent that's discussed in the contract is just from the first year, and then there'll be a provision that talks about how much it increases per year after that. And it can be, there's a lot of ways that you can do it. It can be a fixed dollar increase, it could be an annual percentage increase. And it's like, I really don't like the annual percentage increases because it makes the numbers wonky. It's like, well, the first year is $1,000 a month. The second year you add 3%, so now it's $1,030 a month. The third year you add another 3%. Now it's $1,030.30. You know, it's like it gets really weird. You get these bizarre numbers for whatever the rent is. I like nice round numbers. But that's just me. Anyway.
Seems like that bit confusing.
It is. Well, a lot of this is very confusing.
People.
It is very confusing. But what I'll do with my clients, for example, is I'll sit down and I'll do all the calculation for them. So I'll show them like
schedule or something.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, your first year, this is what the rent is. Second year, this is what it's going to be. If I can do that. Now, if it's
it might vary in between.
Yeah, it might vary because sometimes it's index CPI is I don't know what it stands for, but it's an index.
Mm-hmm.
So it's whatever the inflation is basically based on inflation.
Right.
So it's like you don't know. It's whatever the inflation is next year, then you add that in and you calculate it out.
I don't think I write that in.
It's like I don't know.
That or some boundaries or something.
Yeah, the percentage increase is the most common way to do it.
Yeah.
It just you get like after 5 years you have some like weird number. at that point. Um, but and then the second most popular is the fixed dollar increase. That's what I like to see. Is like, so where it'll just say, okay, this year it's 1,000, next year it's 1,050, and then it's 1,100, and it's nice and easy. Just makes just makes things a little bit simpler and something for the client to understand. And if part of my job is to try to make things clear for the client, so I'll go through the lease and I'll explain everything, but I'll also break out a table and make sure that they understand all the numbers and have the numbers as clear as I can make it. So this is what I was talking about, triple net. So this is an important thing to find out when you're first talking about a lease. Is you need to ask, is this a triple net lease or what? And if it's a triple net lease, what are the triple net fees going to be? So you need to get all those numbers together. So triple net, this is the most common kind. So it's the tenant pays for everything. So you have the rent plus the property taxes plus the insurance plus the maintenance. Those are the three things that are net. So it's taxes, insurance, maintenance. So that's the most common kind that I see. This is for like industrial retail properties. If it's a single tenant, that's really the most common way. Modified gross. This is more common in like multi-tenant situation. You have a lot of
a retail
like a retail strip sometimes, or I've seen them a lot in industrial, where it's where they cover and when it's modified gross, you need to know what's being modified. If it's not triple net, what is it? It's some which expenses. So the landlord in the lease has to spell all this out. The landlord might. So the most common I see is the landlord covers everything except for electricity, for example, or maybe garbage service, or electricity and water and that kind of thing. But they'll usually cover the taxes and the insurance and the common area maintenance. And then full service gross, this is more common in large office buildings, which, I have yet to actually experience in a large office building work, because large offices just isn't where it's at anymore. But that would, in a big office building, that would be a more common way with it. They pay everything. They pay electricity, they pay water, all that kind of stuff. So, okay, security deposit. This is, like it says there, it's largely residential, typically 1 to 3 months rent. So, I see that very often. And I think one reason why you see the deposit so much higher in the commercial than the residential is because the turnover is so slow. So the landlord's taking a much larger risk when they bring in the property is usually a lot more expensive. So there's a whole lot of risk that the landlord's taking, and this is to help them mitigate the risk. Because it might take 2 or 3 months to get another tenant in that space if this person doesn't work out.
Right.
So we do a lot of investigating and making sure that tenant is actually. We do a lot of qualifying for the tenant before we allow one to, or suggest that one to our landlord clients. But they're usually going to want a big deposit, and the shakier the client is, the higher the deposit they're going to want. It's not last month's rent. You'll see that's where things actually get even riskier for the tenant. We'll talk about that in a minute. the security for performance of all the covenants, because there's maintenance obligations, making sure the property is in good condition, the insurance. If they break the use restrictions and the landlord has to sue. So there's all kinds of reasons that they're going to want a large deposit. So the terms are usually a lot longer than in residential. Residential terms are usually year to year. Commercial is typically 3. The smaller the property in the commercial space, the lower the term is going to be normally. So if you're looking at like a little mom and pop kind of like a little office warehouse thing that's part of a row of office warehouses, or a little bitty office space in a larger strip kind of thing, then like 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 years, it would be common. But for like the big commercial properties like McDonald's or
they don't want to give up
yeah,
brand being at that location. Yeah. I'm sure.
So they get very long leases. I've seen 20-year leases on like some of the really big, like cornerstone kind of properties. So you can have some really long-term leases. And this is why tenant improvements are expensive. Often the landlord is going to pay for the improvements. So, if a tenant comes in and says, I want to rent the space, but I need you to build this and build that and all this. Yeah, and well, okay, that's going to cost the landlord, thousands of dollars. And then they get in and it's like, well, you know what, never mind. So in order to recoup their expenses, they're gonna want a longer term. They want stable income. There's one. It's a bargaining tool also. You see this lower per square foot rates for longer commitments. Sometimes in negotiating these deals, food's here. So sometimes in negotiating these deals, we'll say, well, instead of 2 years, what if we commit to 3 years? Then will you be willing to, just a little more down? If we do 3 years or 5 years, maybe then they'll build that stuff that you want, or they'll lower the rent or something like that, or give you a month or 2 months free rent up front. So there's a lot of everything's up for negotiation. Oh wait, I think maybe I missed something here. Oh yeah. Tenants need time to establish a business to recoup their investment and improvements. So that's supposed to it's on the tenant side also, because the tenant might spend a lot of money on a property. I've run into that where it was like, okay, the tenant's going to make the improvements. It's like, well, if I'm going to invest in this property for myself, I want to make sure that the landlord is not going to kick me out once I make this property awesome. I'm going to build this really nice restaurant out of this dump, and if they're just going to kick me out as soon as I get this nice restaurant built, so it can protect both sides. All right. Option to renew. This is super important for the tenant. So it's something you want to make sure that gets discussed. So an option to renew, I was looking at a lease just the other day, and that's what we were talking about, is the proposal on this lease was a 25-year term. And it was to benefit my client to have it that long of a term, because my client was looking at spending about $1.5 million improving his property. So the plan was it's 25-year term with 5-year renewals. That the tenant would have the option to. So that way, the landlord can never throw him out as long as he abides by all the rules, and he can continue to expand it by 5 years on down the road. And sometimes it makes sense because maybe the tenant in this particular case buying the property we were looking at may have cost about $1 million, but if they leased it and then spent $1.5 million on improving it and just paid a small rent for it over the long term, it's like when you look at it over the long term and you look at all the numbers, it made more sense. Even though he just built basically a $2 million property that he's got to walk away from at some point, right? But he made a lot of money in the meantime, and that's really what matters. So it's very important for tenants to have this right, but there's going to be a specific window, and sometimes this window is really crazy. The tenant must give written notice within a specific window. It might be like 90 days prior, and it might be like between, like, you have 30 days to give notice, but that 30 days has to be, no less than 90 days before the expiration. So you have like this 30-day window. 5 years from now, then you've got to put in your written notice, or you lose the right. So that's, mark that on your calendar, dude, because otherwise you're going to be in trouble. So the next thing that's really important is what's called permitted use. If you look at leases for residential, it usually says something like for any lawful purpose or something. It's a very standard kind of thing. In commercial, it's usually it can be very narrow. So, like, here's an example of a narrow one: a restaurant serving Italian cuisine only. All right, as opposed to general retail or restaurant use. And the reason why these are important, both in a lot of ways, they're important for the landlord and for the tenant, is, let's say you're in a mall, you don't want competition. You don't want, like, if you're running an Italian restaurant, you don't want someone else opening up an Italian restaurant right next door or something, So you could have, I actually don't think this mentions this, but you can have a very narrow restriction with Italian, restaurants serving Italian cuisine only. But you can also have one that says, and there's not going to be any other Italian restaurants in this building. So it's like,
options.
You can, so you can.
I would add a backup plan.
Yeah. So you can negotiate it where I'm restricted to only this, but also landlord, you're restricted from doing anything that interferes with my use. So that's also important. If it's going to be narrow, let's make it narrow both ways. Narrow use can kill a business pivot or sale opportunity. You've been running this Italian restaurant, you decide you want to do some kind of Italian, what do they call it, the fusion? It's like, we'll do Italian and Chinese fusion or something like that. It's like, well, you can't do that. Oh, yeah. So, alterations and improvements. So we touched on this a little bit about why the terms can be so long, because someone's going to be investing in the property, and whoever's investing in the property is going to want a long term. If the tenant is investing, they're going to want a long term. If the landlord isn't putting the money in, they're going to want a long term. So, and it could be either way. Sometimes the tenant does the improvements. TI is what we call that, tenant improvements. Tenant pays and owns the they customize it for the business needs. It's a major investment. Landlord improvements, landlord provides an allowance, usually basic improvements, and it's a negotiated point in the lease. So, I mean, sometimes it's worked out where, the landlord, I've seen the landlord give like an allowance of like, okay, $10,000 for whatever improvements that you need. So essentially, anytime you do these kinds of improvements, they have to be with written permission and by insured licensed contractors. Now, this is the part I've run into with my clients that really does shock them and shocks a lot of people. Maintenance and repairs, the tenant's burden. In a triple net lease, the tenant is responsible for almost all maintenance.
Pretty much, they treat it like their own, right?
And I had a situation where my tenant client was looking at this space, and they were concerned about, well, if the air conditioner breaks, like, what if I get in here and the air conditioner breaks, like in the next month or something like that? It's like, well, by the terms of the lease, you're responsible to fix it. But we, everything's negotiable. We worked out in the negotiation where the landlord would be responsible if anything happened. I think we said for like the first 6 months or something like that. The landlord was going to certify that it was operational before we moved in, but also basically give us a warranty on it for 6 months. But yeah, at some point, the tenant is going to be responsible for everything. So tenant responsibilities can include parking lot maintenance and striping, plumbing and electrical systems, HVAC, professional servicing. So, like, let me back up a little bit. Like, parking lot maintenance and striping. There was one client that was really upset by this huge bill that he got because they resurfaced the parking lot. That was very, very expensive. But the way the lease was written, which is the way most leases are written, those expenses are spread out between all the tenants. So whatever percentage, like, and they usually do it on a percentage basis of how much of the occupiable, the rentable space is occupied by that tenant. So if you occupy 10% of the rentable space in the entire strip mall or whatever, then you pay 10% of all of the maintenance for everything. So they got a bill for their portion of that, and it was huge. HVAC professional servicing, HVAC repairs and replacement, interior, exterior maintenance. Landlord's obligation is usually just the floor of the walls and the roof, floor, walls. That's it. Roof, foundation, and structure. Okay, getting out of the lease. Because getting into business is scary. A lot of businesses fail in the first 5 years. Like 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. So if you're going to sign a 5-year lease, you're like, well, 80% chance one business is going to survive this if you're just starting out. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. It may be possible for a new tenant to be assigned the lease. So you have this long lease. And this is almost always with the landlord's permission, it can be assigned to another person to take it over. And then you're out. And then the new tenant takes over. The sublease is the original tenant is still the middleman. So sublease, the new tenant pays the old tenant pays the landlord. Now, even with an assignment, the original tenant is almost always legally. Look, the landlord's not going to let anybody off the hook if they can help it. So even with an assignment, the landlord can say, yeah, I'll let this other person take over the lease, but if they fall through, if they don't pay, you're still on the hook to pay whatever they're supposed to pay. And this is, big exclamation point here. Acceleration clause, if the tenant defaults, the landlord can demand all of the remaining rent for the entire unexpired term immediately. So,
if they don't have money to keep their business going, how are they going to have money for that?
Exactly. Now, as a lawyer, I can tell you it's a bit more complicated than that. A landlord has an obligation to, what's called mitigate damages, which basically means they can't just do nothing and make you pay. So it's usually negotiated out. We usually negotiate some kind of a buyout. So actually, this just happened with me recently. I had a tenant who wanted to get out of their lease. They just signed a lease, a 5-year lease. And then months after they signed it, they realized they couldn't use the building for what they wanted to use it for. They wanted to put in heavier equipment than the floors were rated to handle. So it was like, oh, we're stuck in a 5-year lease, and we can't use this property. What do we do? So it took a while to get everybody on board with this, but they were stuck for 5 years, and the rent was something. The rent and all the yada yada, the triple net fees was about $10,000 a month for 5 more years. So it was a huge amount of money. But when we negotiated it to about $50,000 to buy them out. So they paid the landlord about $50,000. They got out. The landlord had
instead of over $500,000.
Instead of over $500,000. Well, and that's because the landlord could. It was expected that the landlord would be able to rent it out within the next 3 months. So if the landlord does that, then they've mitigated their damages, and they can't go after the tenant for all that stuff.
So like just getting them out before bad becomes worse.
Yeah.
Because in theory,
exactly. So the landlord is more like, look, rather than going to court and suing and just dragging out forever,
just getting out of it.
Just give me $50,000, go away. I release you. I release the and I'll get another tenant, and we'll just carry on from there. So it is a bit more complicated than that, but the default rule is they're on the hook for 5 years for
Could
whatever.
that ever lead to like judgments against other things they own?
Oh yeah. So they can be on the hook. They can get the and usually they're going to be personally liable. A landlord is the whole reason why people start LLCs is to avoid personal liability, right?
Personality.
That's the point of an LLC is limited liability company. That's what the LLC stands for. So that if you get sued, you're limited to just lose the assets that are in the company.
Yeah.
But what a landlord is going to do is say, that's fine and good, but I want your personal guarantee on this note. So well, how it is, you're going to sign as agent of the LLC, plus you're going to sign as personal guarantor for this lease, and so then you can be personally liable. So your personal assets are up for grabs.
That's terrible.
It is, and it can be very scary. You want to make sure that you get the right kind of building that actually does what you need it to do for your business.
Right.
Because in that case, there were like 3 people who signed as personal guarantors, plus the LLC.
And that was a lot of money.
It was, so they were all on the hook, and it was pretty scary. And here's what we're talking about: personal guarantee, the ultimate risk. the landlord will almost always require the business owner to sign a personal guarantee. If the business fails, the landlord can pursue the owner's personal assets, just like we talked about. This puts the owner's entire financial life at risk, not just the business. Now, again, everything's up to negotiation, but if a landlord is not going to take a personal guarantee, they're going to want a whole lot of deposit, you know? So, but usually they're going to want personal guarantees. They're usually want a lot of personal guarantees. They want everybody involved to sign to be what in law is called insolvito liability, which means that, yeah, you're one of the three people who are liable, but we're not dividing it by thirds. You're not 1/3 liable, you're 100% liable. All three of you are 100% liable, so I can go get the money from wherever I can get it. And then you can fight amongst yourselves about who knows what. I'm getting my money. So
wouldn't you be so pissed at your business partner?
Yeah. So that's
it's always the one that has nothing who has
business partnerships. Yeah, that's one of the things I got into law for, was to help businesses get started on the right foot. And the biggest thing that I always tell them to think about is, before you get started in business, think about how you're going to get out. What is your exit strategy? If things go sour, because they almost always do, at some point, how do you get out of this?
That's the one thing I learned about commercial contracts too. A lot of people write their own contracts, realtors, and don't seek an attorney, and they're really bad at it. Yeah. It's like for every single thing you write, you have to pose a question.
You don't know what you're
a resolution, and if it doesn't go well, what is the repercussion? Because people never put if it doesn't happen, what happens? People don't want to think about what happens if all these bad things happen. But you have to.
You have to, because those bad things are going to happen. Yeah. So at some point. All right. So this is almost the end of the presentation. So opportunity and partnership. These are the top things to remember. Rent is the base rent plus expenses. Use clause, remember about the use clause. The tenant, remember what the tenant is responsible for in the building, which is almost everything. And they're almost always personally liable. So very important. So here are things to listen for a possibility of an opportunity. I'm tired of working from my house. Anything that suggests I need the business space. My business is growing and we need more space. My daughter wants to open a business. I'm looking for a better investment than the stock market. This is my favorite.
Yeah, anything.
Because I love investing, and I think real estate is the best investment. And out of real estate, I think commercial is better than residential, but you have to be very careful. So here, contact me, and I have my contact information in there, I think.
Cool.
If not, I'll give it to you. But
can we do another class where we actually write a triple net lease or something, or do case studies?
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
I feel like nothing replaces it doing it.
Yeah, I don't recommend. Well, case studies.
Well, it's like you get a sample scenario and write something to go with it.
But yeah, I don't recommend trying to write a lease.
No.
So I really, it's what I recommend is get me involved. Let me write the lease, because but I want to equip you with the tools that you need to know when there's an issue, and to discuss those issues intelligently with the client, and to say these things are very complicated and very scary and very dangerous to get. If you get something wrong, you can lose everything.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we do it right. I have an expert who I can bring in on this, who has years of experience as an attorney before doing commercial real estate. Let me bring in Morgan, and we can make sure this is all handled correctly.
Yeah.
And then you get a referral fee. So everybody makes money. That's what I want to do. Is everybody makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, you have any other questions or anything about this or about anything else commercial real estate?